Greetings, and welcome to Channel Other Doc. I am Jim, I use he, him pronouns, and this is a special post-mortem for the campaign we played of Urban Shadows, Lex Talionis. It was an urban fantasy game powered by the apocalypse set in modern-day Rome, Italy. We finished up about 3 weeks ago, so we've had a little space from it now. And as you can see, we have a special guest here tonight who's done this with a number of different campaigns now to moderate the thing. Pope, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. I absolutely adore doing these, and this is a particularly juicy one to get into. So let's go around and meet the rest of our familiar faces before we get into all these questions. But before that, I just want to say for all of you guys watching live, please, if you've got questions, throw them into the chat. We will try and address them as we go through this. Thank you all so much. Let's get on to it.
Cool. So let's just go around real quick and say who we are and who we were playing. Of course, I was emceeing the thing, so I played basically everybody that was not the PCs. So for the players that we have with us now today, we have Sara. Hello.
Hello, I am Sara. I use she, they pronouns. I played Kai, the Oracle, who uses they, them, and we just found the original relationship chart where Kai had one connection heading to interest on them, and it was the cat. And
yes.
That has changed significantly for the end of the game. So
there was a bit of a shift as various things happened.
Rome was most wanted.
Yeah. This is true. So many things. Oh dear God. But now let us head over once again to Lynn. Hello.
Hey, I'm Lynn, Flanksters, she, her, and I played Mallory James, also she, her, the tainted and disaster and instigator of shitstir for multiple of these factions that were on this chart.
We're probably gonna have to show the chart sooner or later. It'll happen. I've got it in place now for when we do it.
We will address the chart. The chart is on the list of questions. But the first one that I've got, folks, for me, and it's been nagging me from the very start, from that session 0 that first aired. Why Rome?
Because the other option was Cincinnati, and I live there.
I heard that there were choices.
Yes, there were choices.
It was even the session 0 that aired. So I'm just like, what were they? Like, why Rome? If the only other choice was Cincinnati, I can kind of understand Rome.
There were other choices.
Arizona, like somewhere, like something southwest.
Phoenix may have been.
Phoenix. I think it was Phoenix.
Yeah. So when we originally set this up, and we had 4 players, and I just wanted to also give a shout out to Katie and Alyssa, who, due to real life, at various points were not able to continue playing, and I just I have all the love for them, and continue to do so, and But the campaign would not be what it became without them. We had so among all of us that were in the chat, I threw out about like 10 to 12 cities, and I asked everyone, pick your top 3, and the ones that and then I looked for places in overlap. That's usually what I do when I try to figure out where something's going to happen. We ended up narrowing it down to the top contenders were Rome, Cincinnati, and Phoenix. So obviously Cincinnati was requested not to be the one, and so it was kind of between Rome and Phoenix. And eventually, I just was sort of looking. It was kind of almost a toss up. I was looking at the two, and I was like, I kind of think I'd like to lean in the direction of Rome, just because I know a little bit more about Rome than I know about Phoenix. So that's where we ended up.
That's fair and valid. It's just in that one moment already from like session 0, which again, we're going to get even more into that. It set a very specific tone for the entire campaign. As folks, as an ST, I'm a pantser. I go by the seat of my pants. I have a few like written notes, a couple of tools, but this campaign had so much to it that you've seen some of it. You have, but there's layers, and I don't know if my brain, even in seeing all this, can handle it all. A almost Jonathan Fryean labyrinth of stuff. We've been giggling about the chart, and I think it's important that we address the chart of relationships that from like very early on, like there were a few things with NPCs, but then it becomes this monstrosity that looks more along the lines of a physics drawing of an atom.
I shall go ahead and display the chart just so that people may see my shame and madness.
Yes.
This was how the chart ended up.
Yes.
Yeah. No. By the very end, it becomes this Herculean ball of threads, with tiny little lines that lets you know a element of the relationship, and it from things of like superior to cursed, because that's normal. These are things that are along lines in this giant relationship cloud. Now we should address the cloud. How did it help you, Jim, in the course of telling the story?
So, something that I do when I am getting ready to do a campaign, I kind of... The weird thing is that I am also largely a pantser when the campaign is happening. But I am a planner up until that point. I build all of my cardboard cutouts ahead of time of all of the places and people and things that I think I'm going to need when I go into like campaign planning mode more than anything else. And then we carry the rest out. So I always try to I try to put down some kind of relationship type deal thing if I think it's going to be. Usually I only do it for ongoing campaigns. So this one was a little bit of a shorter format. But I really love Urban Shadows. And this was my first time running it, and I wanted to make the city feel alive and stuff. And so basically I went ahead and did it for this. And so I had one that I kind of just drew up once I figured out who the NPCs were. I had to figure out who all the NPCs were after our session 0. The ones that were both specifically created and then the ones that were suggested to me or that I figured it would make sense for them to be there, or as I was coming up with like storms and threats, because I was still using 1E for this. As I was figuring out the different factions in the city and how it would work, I was like, okay, I had to dump everything into an Excel file, and then I had to color code things initially so I could keep an eye on it, and so I needed basically stuff that I could look at quickly during the game, and be able to just to go to my notes and be like, okay, that's this person, that's what they want, and so I did that on the Excel sheet, and then I also did that for the relationship chart so that I could, if I just needed to grab, remember who's connected to what, then I could just grab that, and so that's how that happened. The chart was much smaller initially. Because this was this chart. This is the one that, and this is the one I was giving to the players. The one that I had was much bigger, but this was how it started, and this ended up being how it's going, basically.
Well, that answers one of my other questions: was how much was this chart, shared with the players? Because I can't even I usually am a note taker when I'm playing in anything, because I forget names. So this is that's the one thing that I will grab just so I can keep names straight. So how did both Sara, Lynn, how did you use the chart, as it were, and how much did it come into play for you during the course of the game?
Well, it helped me sort of as more and more people got interested in Kai, and there kept becoming like more threads there. I'm a note taker, and I forget to write names down all the time, so it's always like that guy with the thing and the stuff and the place, and I never remember names. So for me, it was handy to keep track of who was after my character at any given time, because there was just so much going on. There were so many people, and I did that to myself because I gave Jim a bunch of lore in the beginning. But it was helpful. Yeah, it's all my fault. But it was helpful to keep track of who the actual people were in that, and sort of then who Kai needed to keep an eye out for at any given moment.
And Lynn, how did it factor into your play?
Oh, it definitely helped. Other than enjoying seeing it grow because before, a little bit before, a day or two before the session, Jim would post an updated. So every time we get a little updated chart, and it's nice to see how everything kind of changed. Also, it was incredibly good because I have a thing where I am also bad with names, and just having that. So my window would just be then I would always have a separate thing open for the chart, just so it would be available whenever names were dropped and stuff like that. There's so many, even from the same faction, there are multiple characters, so it was good to actually have that on hand to keep everything in line.
Yeah, almost like a coroner looking at a body. I get this chart when I sign on to doing this, and I'm just sitting there combing over it, going over what I saw the show my first go round when it was going live, and just okay, I recognize these names, I recognize some of these relationships, but also just going, there's a if you take a look at that chart, if you go back and take a look at it, some of those factions are very lopsided, which is always very interesting in power dynamics, because sometimes those small ones, there's a lot of concentrated power, while others are diversified. And sometimes, no, there are many, and they're all like the Hulk of heavy hitters, and it's just interesting to see all of that. Whilst we're on the element of tools, we got a couple of questions here in the chat from Unstable D. I kind of want to combine them. So Unstable Diaz, Thieves Guilded, thank you for your questions. But I think I can kind of combine these into what sort of going to that prep that you mentioned, Jim, when you're doing that campaign prep. I know you do a lot of stuff beforehand, and then the session 0 hits and gives you so much info. And that is one of the reasons why folks do a session 0, because it makes your life as an ST so much easier, because you will get all of these hooks that you can then just play on for months. But what sort of tools did you use in the lead up and then after that session 0?
So what I typically will start with when I'm getting ready to do a campaign like this is like the one application I still have for journaling a little bit. So I have like this little notebook, and I put together some potential. None of these are accurate anymore, by the way. After I leave the physical document and I move to the digital, and we actually get into the campaign, things can change back and forth. So I put some very vague notes in as to how I wanted to do things. But this is sort of where I put in the different pie slices and stuff like that for the various threats that were on clocks. Storms and threats, sort of as I was setting it up with sort of sitting down with the book and just writing crap out. So I have that. At the same time, what I will usually start doing, and this will typically be at session 0, it's with a lot of things I've discovered, especially over the last few years, last couple of years in particular. When I have to work with digital tools, the best thing I can do is just dump my brain into an Excel file. So I have, so every time I start up a campaign now, and this is pretty much strictly for online games. I haven't played any in-person games in quite a while. So for in-person games, I use something more a little bit like bullet journaling, because I try to be because analog seems to work better for me when the game is analog, and then digital works better for me when the game is digital. So with every time I start a new game, I start a new Excel workbook, and I have. Wait, let me count the tabs. 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. I've got like 17 tabs. That's actually less than the one I did show Pope some of my notes ahead of time, but I cleaned them up ahead of time and I reduced the number of tabs in the notebook so that it was just, the actionable information, because a lot of it is stuff that I take notes I take down at the beginning, and then it changes. People's names change, characters' names change, and so it's not all in there. But yeah, I add tabs for sort of a. When I'm running a game, I have in the tabs I basically sort of write an outline for session 0 for myself in one of the Excel tabs, so that I can look down and see, okay, we're at this point. It's for this one I had, talk about the principles of Urban Shadows and things about the game in general. Go down for each character what the different things they put on their sheets were, which for Powered by the Apocalypse games, typically it's a lot of answering questions, which is great, because that feeds into stories. So that's sort of the point. That's why I do that with Powered by the Apocalypse games in particular. But then, then I wanted to talk about how supernaturals work, so we had a section on that. And then I had a section talking about different things in the city, and then rumors. And so then off of that, I open a tab for kind of each one of these categories, and I take notes down in the different things. So I have like a tab for the PC information, NPC information, debts, events, points of interest, stuff that we did. We created a hub for this one, which was the only thing I really borrowed from 2nd edition, because it turned out to be useful plot-wise, if nothing else. And then just various things that I need to remember the names of, and other things that I may need to remember later on, threat moves. Stars and wishes, that kind of thing. I have notes on fashion and various other things.
As is somewhat of a carryover from the regiment.
It is.
It out.
Wasn't going to happen, but with Alyssa's concept, just pulled me right back in to having to read up on fashion.
Yeah, we had the looming fashion show there for a while. All this prep getting ahead of that show. As this sort of like central point and lead, but no, so that makes a lot of sense. But folks, like I've run games on Roll20. I'm much more of an analog person, but just the sheer number of like pictures for locations, plus the actual like city map with the zones.
Oh yeah.
Even those little bits help for a good deal of verisimilitude and just quick reference for your players. So
yeah.
taking that extra leap goes a long way.
I'll also
especially
if I can, I'm sorry, if I can just for just so that I make sure credit is given where credit is due. Talking about the city map, that's not something I drew. That's that was something I got on Wiki Travel. As there was a group of people that a few years ago were trying to figure out zones in Rome. So it's like, how do we talk about Rome? And so it worked out pretty perfectly. And then I added little notes to it. So like the headings were the people that were working on that at Wiki Travel, and then the subheadings underneath them that you may see, that's all me, where I just try to because Wiki Travel was very helpful actually at the beginning, because they had sections on each of these districts. These are not real districts. These are ones they just came up with to try to describe them, right? So these are not like city zoned things, but I just came up with those, and as I was looking at the different district information, I tried to condense them down into, okay, here's basically what's in those districts, and so there was that. Also, for the relationship chart, for anyone asking, that was Gitmind that I was trying out, and a little bit cumbersome at first, but it worked out, I think.
Definitely, and just having this sort of like that reference, I know for me as an audience member coming into this, being able to, because when you just have a map, unless you really dig into it, you don't get a feel for the location. So having the zones opens things up. But I want to get onto urban shadows for a bit. Like, Jim, I know you have experience, but for Sara, Lynn, this was your first time playing urban shadows. I want to pick your brains here about your experience, but in order to get to where we're going, we need to go back often. So what drew you to the playbooks that you were playing?
You want to go first?
There's some wonderful smiles.
Yeah, I honestly, I can't resist like that, demon in debt thing. And it's like, okay, I got it. It's like, oh, I have to. It's like I gotta do this, and then just having like it being like a different take on it, where it is your awful boss sort of thing, instead of being like, let's say, like in love with the demon. It's like, this is just a boss that unfortunately has your soul, and it was just the way that I kind of want to take it, and like being able to like kind of be able to play a little chaotically, also turn into a demon, a cool like demon monster, it's up there.
It's rad. And Sara, what drew you to the Oracle?
So in real life really love tarot decks and oracle decks and that kind of divination, cartomancy type of thing. And I will always play the divination character if it's available. It's just my type. And so having like literal the oracle, like if there's divination moves, I'll take them. If there's not really a divination playbook, but this one, it was the whole playbook was about that. And so I was very, very down with that.
And going off of that, Jim, this is something that I know not just myself sometimes, but a lot of other STs struggle with, when specifically dealing with visions. The Oracle is all about visions. How did you tackle this?
You had some good ones to give to Kai.
Yeah. Good ominous ass ones.
The funny thing about it, and I will tell you, and I will tell you that the visions, the content of the visions themselves was basically stuff I kind of made up on the fly as to how it came out. But I wanted to hint at the stuff, all that stuff that I had just shown that I had written down, because I knew what the threats were ahead of time, and so I wanted to try to bring those, knowledge of those out as things happened. And I've got to say that I have noticed that a lot of times some Urban Shadows MCs will have difficulty with oracles, and I feel like they're a positive boon, because not only can you leak plot details, but you can also use them for cliffhangers. And we did that at least 3 times.
At least the first 3 or 4 sessions were all Kai cliffhangers.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. No.
Oh, no.
That is an excellent thing to reference and address. And I appreciate a good cliffhanger or stinger, and that is something to definitely lean into. But that just goes to show, folks, do a bit of prep, and then you can do the hand wavium smoke and mirrors thing and make it look and sound a lot cooler than it feels like in your own head. Now, having experienced these playbooks and this story, Lynn, Sara, how do you feel about Urban Shadows now that you've been through it?
I really dig it as a system. Urban fantasy is really fun. And it's just a cool genre that I've always liked. And so getting to play in that, because there's not many games that are devoted to urban fantasy. I can think of a couple off the top of my head, but it's not like the high fantasy where you have this plethora of system choices. So, and I thought it was messy, and that's what I really liked about it. This game got that chart is a mess. The relationships were a mess. The city was a mess. This game was messy as hell, and it was wonderful for it. And I think Urban Shadows the system really has you as characters and as the storyteller lean into that in ways that other systems don't.
Lynn, your thoughts?
I really liked it. I mean, as far as I've played around the time, a lot of Powered by the Apocalypse games, and I think the one thing I like about this, I love the urban fantasy, that whole kind of modern sensibility to it, but also the way that it plays with circles and the politic angle of having all these factions around, and how the game through play kind of builds on top of it, on top of the place also. Because a lot of building stuff came from some of the moves that we made too. So it was a nice organic way to have all those things change in a lot of ways. I didn't necessarily I was surprised by a lot of them, the way things happened, just being the character messes that we are.
And Jim, this was your first time running. What was that experience like?
Oh, it was good. It was so good. I mean, I was always a bit nervous to tackle it, because it became one of my favorite RPGs. Basically, once I got to play it for the first time on a stream over on Off the Table. And that experience was a very sort of profound one for me, with the sort of the buy-in that I had on that character, and the way things went. And I was just I really was thinking, someday I'm going to try to put this into rotation for something I run at some point, because it just playing it felt brilliant, and I thought, okay, I gotta. Hopefully running it will be just as rewarding, and I can tell you yes, very much so. Very in a different way, but it was really great. I love doing urban fantasy, and the other games that I have played and run, that so I've played a little bit more than I've run, but the other games don't work with the way my brain works quite as well as urban Shadows does, because the Powered by the Apocalypse tends to kind of complement the way my brain works when it works. So that was it was nice to be able to just sort of slip it on like a glove. I know it's sort of almost weird and trite to say that, I guess, or it's, but it was a very cool experience because it felt like it went really. I hope it went really well.
Well, the story was definitely compelling and was absolutely, as we've seen, littered with characters. Some of which like just seemingly came about, others that were kind of formed in that session 0. I'm always curious when it comes to session 0s, especially from because I do them so much as an ST, but I don't do them that much as a player, as that tool has yet to fully disseminate. But so from the player perspective, how much did that give you to latch onto the character, and how did that aid you going forward?
For me, I think the session 0 I think is the most helpful thing as far as like kind of getting a feel for what the kind of like the group is, and kind of like how like what your character is like role in it. Because by the time we finished that session 0, I kind of knew the trajectory of like kind of where I wanted to take Mallory, and kind of like what her relationship with every other character was, what the kind of the focus of the story was, and just it gives you, at least me as a player, a very sturdy foundation where you don't go in and you just like it's just up, not going in with a session 0. It's just like there's a lot of unknowns at that point, and I like kind of going in there just kind of like having stuff kind of like semi-formed and then hitting the ground.
Sara, what was...
So for me, it anchored Kai, because I think I sent Jim all the lore about Kai before session 0. Like I nailed down that they were. I asked Jim. It was like 3:00 in the afternoon. I was like, "Hey, can I be the Oracle of Delphi?" And had sent Jim. I did all that character chart stuff to myself. Sent Jim all the detail before session 0, so I kind of knew Kai's plot, but I didn't know where they really fit in the world, like in terms of like, apart from having a chosen one type of fate, who are you as a human? So it really helped kind of nail them down for me in terms of relationships with other people who weren't trying to get them to join a cult or, you know, use them as a tool. So it you know, it kind of helped me figure them out as a person, not just a plot full of tropes.
Well, that's excellent, and another reason you should always have a session 0, folks.
Mm-hmm.
But now getting with that and having those characters, and now hearing about like all this sort of backstory that he gave Jim, and Jim all the backstory he received, that led to a lot. Like, we have the neutron cloud of NPCs. Like, in the telling of the story, what were some of your favorite NPCs from this tale? Like, who is someone that you just absolutely loved your time with?
Ah, yes, the which children do you prefer question.
I have to ask it.
That's fair. So let's see. I did enjoy playing. There were a few that kind of stand out in my head. I enjoyed playing. I enjoyed the effect that Olympia Fortunato had. I actually didn't play her as much as sort of suggested her throughout the entire thing. It's one of those, it's the this person is off screen but we're going to talk about them all the time thing, basically. Because and as I sat there and I was like, okay, how would Medusa try to sort of deal with reality and possibly have followers at this point to be able to do the deity thing, essentially. And it was kind of awesome. Just then, as I was trying to look at all the information on the different fashion houses in Italy, when I stumbled across the Versace logo, I was like, well, that's got to be it, because the Versace logo is Medusa. So I was like, there, well, nope, there we go. And she's now got worshippers because her face is plastered up all over the place. That'll work. So that was one favorite, just plot wise. One favorite I had RP wise, I guess, and I'm almost slightly ashamed to say this, was Mr. Sharp.
Yes.
Because
I love those so much.
Yeah, it just basically it's he was there's a thing that I did that I haven't done as often in games that I run, but I've done it before. I did it actually for Mashed, which was on here that Pope you were in, and that is I didn't tell anyone because I didn't want them to be influenced, but I did have, I don't know if you call them face claims. Is that what the kids are calling them? They weren't exactly face claims. They were kind of touchstones. For me, as to things that I look at and I'm like, how did I play this character? And I looked and I put it on my in my Excel file. But they're not in the one I sent you because I was ashamed of myself. But I will reveal that I wanted Mr. Sharp to be kind of a more modern Harry Lime type, basically.
Okay.
To an extent.
Okay.
So there was a bit of the Orson Welles character from The Third Man, a little bit in there, as just very roguish, and I kind of did, and it's a thing I also used in the in Mashed, sadly, because it started to fit too much. Is that I also invoked Robert Downey Jr. some for him, just sort of in my head when I was trying to figure out the little things, because it was like. You can do Orson Welles for bits of it, but that's only going to take you so far when you're dealing with certain things, and so that sort of so I just sort of melded those two together, and that's kind of what I came up with. It was more fun than it probably had any right to be to play that character.
And on the note of smiles and cackling, Lynn, who are some of your favorite NPCs as we continue on with, I feel, Mr. Sharp?
Yeah, on that thing, yeah, I think the consistent one was probably Mr. Sharp, because it was a really fun kind of back and forth. There's like two people that like purposely get on each other's nerves and playing a certain like amount of like petulance, because she can't like, Mr. Sharp is always going to be the boss. It's just like kind of towing that line of like how much can I annoy him before like he like snaps back, and is just like just pushing each other's buttons was a lot of fun. But the other one I think was also Gia, the cat, was also fun, because it's like it was knowing kind of that workplace, that field that they're both in, and just like seeing Gia do all like the cute cat shit. It's like, you're doing that bullshit again. It's like, I know your game. This is I know you. Stop doing that. You're doing this on purpose to make people feel better because you're a cute little cat. I know you. Sort of thing.
That was some delightful interplay. Just did like the facial contortions as Gia was in the scene. Just coming off of Mallory, it was a delight to see. Sara, what were some of your favorite NPCs to interact with over the course of the story?
I really liked Olympia, like the one scene that Kai and Olympia Fortunato had together, because I think it was probably the first time. What did this game take place over? Like 72 hours?
All those
If
the worst
that?
3 days of
Yeah, it was like the first time in 3 days that Kai actually felt like safe. Like, okay, this person is not after me. This person is not adding to my life being more difficult. I apparently am Medusa, but we know each other and I get a good vibe. So I really liked that in terms of like that scene was at like the climax moment. We finally got to the fashion show and Kai was finally getting a moment of respite, if you will. And I also really liked the interactions with Charon, however we're pronouncing their name. Um, who knows? That was just, I thought that was a fun sort of mentorship thing that ended up happening accidentally because we rolled bad and went to hell one time. Which just goes to show you the wildness of RPGs, that relationship happened because of a bad dice roll. But I liked the kind of the way that Kai latched onto like the ferryman and the ferryman of the underworld as their mentor. Not anybody who was offering to help them, but they just were like, "Hey, you dude in the ferry boat, I'm gonna talk to you."
Can I just say I had absolutely no plans whatsoever to bring Charon into this game. He was not an NPC. He was no threat. He was nothing that he was not on my list anywhere. But it made sense for him to be there when they ended up in the underworld. And then I was like, okay, I guess we'll use this since there's another failed roll. But it's like, well, because it's like, well, what would this connect to? So I just basically, I thought about it, and I grabbed from X Fun Sidao, and there it was.
I also really liked Ileana, despite that she was evil, and I turned her into a statue at the end. Because it's fun to have the people that are like, oh, come with me, it'll all be fine. And go, no, it's sort of like Mallory and Gia, like, nope, you're full of shit. This is not good, but you're gonna keep trying to sell me anyway.
Fair. Absolutely fair. Sometimes it's the people that we loathe that we love to interact with the most. And kind of transitioning as we've mentioned Charon and Olympia, like in your normal urban shadows, like 1E stuff, Olympians don't factor into that. so like bringing essentially an entire other faction into the game. We saw like seeds of that throughout the entire thing, but what really like just for you, Jim, grabbed hold and went, okay, we're doing this.
Well, I mean, it was the decision of that it's going to be in Rome. It was pretty much like, okay, I have to. This is the only way I can honestly do this. And I mean, I had also had certain inspiration. It's that the first edition of Urban Shadows was inspired also heavily to an extent by the Dresden Files. They've said this in interviews. And I too am a fan of that series, and so they mix everything together very nicely, including deities and what have you. And I wanted a kind of a balance of different types that included those kinds of concepts. So it's like in Urban Shadows First Edition in particular, perhaps there will be a bit more of that in Second Edition, I think, once it finally comes out and they finally release all of the playbooks that are involved there. But the First Edition, you don't really have angels, you don't have former deities or deities of various pantheons, but they do turn up in urban fantasy. And they're all across TV and books. And I mean, if you've ever watched Supernatural, they went through every freaking thing I think they possibly could.
A few others,
Yeah.
But you also that's an excellent point, because you look at things like Percy Jackson,
Yeah.
and then like there is so much of the, even with the MCU, we have Thor, we have the Norse pantheon. It's the elements of the old religions are deeply embedded into urban fantasy. So I was just wondering where that origin was. So it really started from, okay, we're doing Rome.
Yeah.
And came from there. I was just wondering, because that was something that was just nagging me. Is like, okay, in the realm of urban fantasy, that is definitely a trope that gets used, but where did it come from?
And I remember, and this is something I got to go to Rome when I was younger, so like back in the 90s, for a few days, and just remembering that just how much of the culture is infused with that heritage of people who used to worship these this pantheon of deities, and just seeing that. And I remember even talking to people from that part of the world. I remember once talking to someone from Greece, asking, "What do you have for demons?" That and there was and what she ended up describing to me was basically a minotaur. I feel like culturally a lot of stuff from Roman mythology and Greek mythology and mythologies of all the local areas bleeds into it a lot. It's just it takes up a certain amount of space that other mythologies, other religious mythologies do for us in America. And so I felt like, okay, we're doing this in Rome. This has got to be involved, just because this is urban fantasy at its, I think to an extent, at its core, is about the things that people tell stories about in whatever culture, in whatever city it is you're focusing on. And this was in Rome, so the things they tell stories about, while definitely they tell stories about other modern stuff, more modern stuff, they're going to tell stories about the Roman gods, because it's all over the place. It's in the statues. It's everywhere. So that's it had to be there. It just had to.
On the note of like specific notes and beats of urban fantasy, this is sort of like one of my new favorite pet questions that I am starting to use more and more often, and it is, what was your favorite trope that got used in the course of the campaign? Because there were very specific beats throughout this entire campaign, and I just want to know what was like your favorite trope that like either you used, someone else used, because there were a couple that definitely got nailed as we went along.
Well, for me, I can tell you that unfortunately the way that my brain works, it's like, okay, now I have to pick an item that I can't quite clearly grab. So if someone could name some examples for me, then I could probably figure it out better for me. Anyway.
I will give you one of my favorite tropes, but it also drives me insane that got used, and you can see it in the last episode, folks. Angels in freaking trench coats. Like, that's a freaking thing. I don't know why. I have been tracking it for some time. I know we've got It's a Wonderful Life, but like, it just keeps getting used, and it popped up here.
I actually was going to try to say a different kind of coat, but unfortunately the word that came out was trench coat, because I hadn't. It was like sort of in my. I had an image of what that angel was, what Sandalphon was kind of going to look like, and I couldn't quite conjure up the coat in time. So
it was just.
It was like, all right, it's a trench coat.
subconscious meme.
Yeah. A lot of the tropes that I used were subconscious. They just sort of happened as it was going on.
Well, if you even go back to that episode, there was a mention of Nick Cage in the same episode, so we got that as well with our angels in trench coats. So
There was a Cage. That's true. I will say, actually, one that I also liked that was... Okay, there are a couple of things. Now that I kind of have an idea of what you're talking about, there were a couple of things that I really liked that I enjoy using just in... This isn't even necessarily just urban fantasy, but the idea of a portal to other realms was something that I from early on that I really liked putting in that I enjoy having that to play with. Especially when you can combine that with, you know, a tool that is very powerful and potentially dangerous if people who are operating it don't fully understand how it works. That's always a fun one. But then closer to the end, I do like, for some reason, I do enjoy teleporting wizards, but only in modern day. I don't like them as much if they're in fantasy for some reason. So that's a thing also.
Teleportation of modern convenience.
Yes, that's right.
Speaking of teleportation, Lynn, what were some of your favorite tropes that got used?
I like the one for involving Kai, where it's the person that with the special power that is just pushed to kind of take control of their own death, just in spite of everyone trying their hardest to control that person, and just
so
angrily taking it back. It's one of the things I love.
So a full story beat. Okay, really cool.
I also like what was it, supernatural stuff, someone that's so immersed in it, it's it's mundane at a certain point, it's treated by them, it's yeah, werewolf, sure, cool, all right.
Yeah, it's just one more on the list.
Yeah.
So Sara, what were some of your favorite tropes?
I really love supernatural creatures using technology. So the fact that Via Lupus had this app was just fantastic for me. Or no, it wasn't Via Lupus. It was Vex who had the app.
Vex.
Yeah.
So, and that it was on everybody's phone. And so just for some reason, vampires and werewolves using iPhones is really funny to me. And there's no reason they shouldn't be using it. It's not the immortal guide still typing like this or anything, but so I really liked that there was that whole app component to it. And man, I love a good social media joke as well, with Mallory ripping that subway station apart and just walking away, and everyone got it on film and no one knows it was Mallory, and so Kai sort of promising her to get footage, if at all possible, of the ass kicking in the parking lot.
No, that
and then it happened. It was a demon who took apart a subway, and Rome was just like, okay.
Just shrugged.
This is not the weirdest thing I've seen today. Ciao.
That was something of there was a very specific kind of mood to Rome, that was it felt distinct from a lot of other urban fantasy settings and games I've seen. One of the things that felt very specific to the locale, and part of my reason of brain being obsessed with it's Rome, is architecture as places of power, because that was very much a part of this story, and I just want to go around and pick your brains about it. Again, Rome's this iconic place with these iconic architecture, fountains, bridges, sculptures, as one was added. Um, these these things are part of these people's everyday lives, but it featured quite heavily in this campaign, where the location helped tell the story. Like when people ask me about Urban Shadows, I go, the city's the enemy. It's not the factions, it's the city. It's alive and it wants to fuck you. Um, in but in this case, it was alive and it had a component and it had its part to play, but it felt almost like the city itself was another political player. Um, so I just want to pick your brains about that and how you all sort of like contributed and leaned into it.
I think for me, I love the idea of sentient cities. Like anything with enough age on it is going to have some sort of power to it and be its own thing. And Rome's been around for freaking ever. So of course it's going to be a place of power. Of course the city is going to have its own quirks and weirdness. Like Kai was working out of the basement of catacombs that had been turned essentially into an office building. And that's really weird, and it's only going to happen in something as old as Rome. Like we would not have had that had the game been set in Cincinnati. It would have been like in the attic of a chili shop or something. But and I can make fun of that because I'm from here. And so for me, it was just like I've never been to Rome. I've only seen it in pictures, so it was cool to have those places of power and have this city that was almost alive and almost it kind of was with, you know, the statues that were going to be coming alive, that they even had the ability to do that. You know, you're not going to have even statues in DC that old, that are old-ish, aren't going to have the power to be inhabited by Hecate. Like they've got to be old to do that. So that was really cool for me.
Lynn, your thoughts?
I just liked having as much sense of history with the city like Rome. If you said it like in like America, like things don't go back, but there's a sense with like Rome, it's one of those cities that like it seems like it always like is going to be there because it's existed for so long, and the fact that it has this character from existing in modernity and as well as like ancient, like that stuff is just like piled on top of each other. So there's all that stuff, not even just like the church home, but just like the fact that like it dates further back than that, and you can layer that stuff because it's like it's that thing where it's like they can't dig like subway, like foundation without hitting or ruins of some sort, whether it be like Roman or older, and the way that stuff builds up. It's not just like a planet city, it's a city that just like has just culture built on top of it and just develops like interesting things to it.
Jim.
Yeah, I mean, the thing with Rome itself being a character, I did feel very much as though there are a lot of, I'm not sure how well I can articulate this, but the places that were important and have been important to people for thousands of years are representative of things to them that they deeply believed in. Trevi Fountain, the site where those three roads cross, has been basically a symbol of horizons since like 19 BC or so, when they figured, let's put the aqueduct here, basically. But that's that's where they wanted to that's where they wanted it to come out. So that it sort of was everything that they did of great significance was awash in these deep beliefs that they had, and which is why. And there's some argument as to whether or not Trevi Fountain is representative of Oceanus, as I had it be, or just of Neptune. And there's been a little bit of back and forth about it. But either way, you've still got a lot of the basic ideas sort of in place that carries forth, and so I'm like, people will treat these areas. I mean, the place already has a lot of character in and of itself, just in real life. If you just sort of look at the place, and I did a lot of. I did a lot of video. I watched a lot of videos of walking tours of different places and different neighborhoods, and just to see that each neighborhood kind of does have this very distinct flavor from that's been there for a really long ass time. So it's not only does the city have a soul or multiple souls, but it's if it has a soul, it's a very old soul, and so that's something that I tried to bring about with things that would happen or things that people would interact with, because it's like if something's always been there, then you will have often a reaction of like, oh, okay, well, there's, we've encountered this thing before, whatever the thing is. So that's, in many ways, I think that ended up getting reflected in why a lot of the citizens ended up having these, what seemed on the surface in some cases to be blasé reactions to supernatural stuff happening. Although, again, it was mostly with the supernatural community. The Vatican had some very specific reactions, but that's its own thing. But there is very much this struggle. There is very much this struggle. Thank you for asking this, because I'm reminded now. There is this sort of core struggle, I think, between a lot of the cultural touchstones set in place by these older religions. Between that and the relatively newer Catholic Church, which has its entire country, its entire city-state just across the river. It's saturated with both, and there is, I think, there was definitely a tale of a struggle to be told there, I think.
Well, also just like the regular highlighting of borders within some place that is like, while it is a city, is built on all these bones, confined, but borders mattered very much in this story than I've seen in a lot of other Urban Shadows. It's like, yeah, the werewolves kind of get a little territorial. Sometimes the vampires do that as well. But like the Magi, unless you're like screwing with their sanctum, they really just don't. They don't care. So here you had these factions, and then very specific delineations and borders that were this huge theme and turning point, and just almost Chekhov's gun in some ways, as we just go to the bridge and look at everything that was featured at the bridge. So you definitely see like the city itself being reflected in the narrative, and that's something that I don't think a lot of games do, and it's one of the things that made this specifically special. But on that sort of note, with one of the things that made this special is something that I think is indicative somewhat of you, Jim, in that there's this short time frame that happens. So time is like a pot boiler, but we take a long time to address this short time. And it's something that I find is quite unique to your stories, as where some people just try and barrel on through your 72-hour period. You took your time with the pressure cooker that is a limited time. And I kind of want to get the feel from the cast as well, because this is not something that people do. So, kind of go with Lynn, because I'm seeing that sort of flash of recognition in your eyes. How did you feel about that? How did that sort of like play into your part in this tale?
I think the way I went through that whole thing took it for Mallory is that she is treating this like almost like it didn't have enough time for her to sink in that like things were like barreling out of control. So she was treating most of that campaign like it's okay. This is like just a day. Weird, like annoyances are happening, but this is more. I think this is more normal for Mallory than like maybe other PCs, because like most of that thing was just like she wasn't necessarily grappling with like the higher, the upper level. She was like, I gotta find these goddamn suits. Or else,
Mm-hmm.
so I can go home and I can sleep for a few hours.
Sara, since you being at the center of that relationship map for many folks, how did time play for you?
I thought it was really interesting because it's one of those things where sometimes like when there's a lot coming at you, like life happens at you fast, but like when there's a lot of things happening, time can either speed up or it can really slow down for you. And I think, and for Kai, there's so much happening to them all at once. With suddenly they have these powers, and then there are all these people after them, and then they went to hell, and then Mallory took apart a subway, and then all this other stuff happened, and now there's an archangel. Like, it was one of those where time really slowed down for them. So I think Kai probably wanted it to speed up a little faster, just because, like, kind of like Mallory, like, please God, let me get to a point where I can sleep it off. But Sara, playing Kai, going through all of that, everything is happening so fast. It was really nice to have that be stretched out, because it almost felt like the time dilation effect that happens when your life is just going out of control.
Jim.
So a couple things I should probably mention. So on the one hand, the time dilation thing is just kind of a thing that I don't do 100% consciously. It's a thing that happens in most games that I run. It is very difficult for me to say, okay, we're jumping ahead now, because I just never know when the players want to do something, and I want to make sure they have a chance to. And the funny thing is that this time I think it was not just me, because every game of Urban Shadows I've played in has also been like this. Now, I'm not saying... Now, I have watched a couple of other games where they do try to knock things ahead further. So I think that as an MC, I'm much less inclined to just say, all right, we're stopping this now, and now we're going to the next thing. Because I feel like there's a... but every game that I've played in, though, has given room for the scenes to breathe, has given room for the RP to happen, and to let the characters develop and go where they want to go and do what they want to do. I find that more interesting than just trying to move things ahead just for the sake of having a path for them to go on, necessarily. It's one of the, even, to get to get even a little more rarefied in here, in PBTAs, often one of the principles is to do what honesty demands. And just for me, and it's maybe it's just part of the fact that I'm not generally as lethal a GM as a lot of other GMs. I'm not generally as brazen as to impose my will on things, I think, as a lot of GMs sometimes tend to be. And I'm not saying that that's necessarily a good or a bad thing. It's just my GMing style is different. But I have, I think, almost a need to kind of try to make sure people are doing what they want to do. Because it kind of messes with me if to an extent when they don't, especially if I feel like I'm responsible for that. And I mean, sometimes I will, I am fully capable, I think, of bringing a hammer down, but I think that I don't feel like it should ever come completely out of left field that there even could have been a hammer in the first place, if you take my meaning.
Yeah, but the interesting thing that I find, not just with this game, but with a lot of your style, is while there is plenty of time to take time, much of your games take place in these very short time periods that have this feeling of urgency. And yet time slows to give the characters time to address not just what they need to get done, but their feelings on that urgency. Because a lot of times we get one, not the other. And so it's one of those things I just wanted to bring to light, because it's something that I find unique, in that a lot of times when you have this, pressure cooker, I know I have a tendency to jump cut backwards and forwards. I do this comic book thing. But for you let these scenes, play out, and we get a lot of interaction with the characters and get a lot of feel for the characters, and as well as their personalities coming through. And that is something I think that is a combination of your ST style and also this system.
I always like to joke, welcome to Urban Shadows, where the days stretch like taffy. I think I actually said that at one point during the campaign.
Yes.
It does happen. It does happen in Urban Shadows.
Well, especially as soon as the fashion show was brought forward.
God, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That just everything stretched.
They're so much later than I expected. I will say that.
But that now I have a very specific question, and I also want Sara, Lynn, you to think of something to ask. But this is my pointed question that was left unanswered. Who was the second suit for?
I have that question too. So,
you ready?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The second suit was for Duchess Gloriana.
Oh.
So the one vision that I think we didn't get into, the part of the vision that we didn't really explain much that came up, was there's a part in one of Kai's visions where a pair of horns unites with a crown. And the thing that I kind of hinted at a little bit, but which we never really got into, and I think maybe we would have gotten into it more if we would have gotten into it more maybe if Alyssa had been able to continue with Manny, because there's more connection on that side. Because the thing that because for folks who may have watched, if you remember the last time we saw Manny, she got a message that the angel wanted to talk to her. And the angels, I sort of had the part of the host that Sandalphon works for. I kind of had this weird sort of celestial MI5 type thing basically going on in my head anyway. MI5, MI6 type deal. They were basically wanting to use Manny. We're going to use Manny as an agent to try to see, because they suspected Gloriana was involved, and they wanted to find out if that was the case or not. because should I say, well, you see, this opens up the longer plot thing that I never planned to have resolved during this, but the bigger thing that was going. Would you like to know the bigger thing that was going on? I'll be happy to say it.
Yes.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Bigger thing. I mean, what's bigger than a freaking archangel?
I was just gonna say.
It's hard to say. Mr. Sharp wanted to kind of orchestrated a good portion of it because he wanted to get a hold of the tablet with the angel still inside it, and basically use that to go down and take over his legion in hell. Possibly take over hell, depending on how things were going to go. And he knew he was going to need support from another major player. And in order to do that, and also as a thing I kind of hinted at that I never really dug into, he and Gloriana were kind of dating. Basically. So they were kind of together. So it was a little bit, it was messy, like a lot of the game is. It wasn't, there were certain personal feelings that were kind of involved in this as well, but basically she had certain, if folks may remember, she had certain reservations about the new High Queen Nyx, daughter of Oberon, and whom we never saw. But there were things that then with both of those suits available, with threads of fate in them, which the main thing is that you can, the main thing that in my head that the threads of fate allow you to do is it lets you basically hop over and affect things you can't normally affect, essentially. Which is why it's helpful in spellcasting. When, say, you want to, say, like, move a mantle, the mantle of the Pythia from one person to another without killing the subject. Or if you want to, say, mess up the way that Trevi Fountain is structured so that it's no longer working as a directional as a directional control for the gateway in the Pantheon. But the things that this would have allowed, that there's a lot more to it, and I won't get into it in huge detail here, man. But there was basically things that Sharp was doing with contracts kind of on the side, including a contract with Olympia he was going to try to put together that involves her granddaughter, that basically was going to make it so that they could not act against him when he did this. And an alliance with the Fae would have been very helpful in that, basically.
Oh, that's very funny. It makes me even feel worse for those articles of clothing because they're basically treated like a tall coffee that you put on top of like a object, and then just like you got distracted. And it's like, oh, I gotta do this. Oh, shoot! I left those things there. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That was what that extra thread that Manny had left over that she hadn't identified yet was. That was a thread of fate.
Oh, that must have been... Oh, that makes you feel so much better. Or better, because Mr. Sharp is like, oh my god, you have to get these things back. It's like, I don't know why.
Yeah.
Just give me casual about this and just get them back when they feel like it. Oh my god.
I don't. That was the thing that was just driving me batty. I know there's probably some lingering questions that Lynn and Sara, you both have. So Sara, looks like you've got something that you want to get out. So I want to hear it.
I have notes. I have notes. I won't say they make any sense, but thank you. The Duchess Gloriana comment clarified the symbol of flaming horns and the shining crown, because I had a big question mark behind who that was supposed to be. there was a comment in, I think, the last vision, one of them, I don't know, about a lone figure fighting half a dozen people.
Oh,
Who
yeah.
was that?
That was I think that was Virgil.
That was Virgil going toe to toe with like "Come at Me" world.
Yeah. That was basically fighting the mafia and the people that essentially were. And the spells being hurled at him in that vision were of course from were of course from the consigliere, yes. Delphina Jenna.
And speaking of Delphina Jenna, I want to know, did Virgil go after her? Like, is she still hanging around?
Never really decided on that. It could have gone either way. I find I liked Delphina, the character of Delphina, a little bit more than I thought I was going to. So, maybe she survived.
Of this, like, Revenant thing, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, she's on his list. Yeah.
Yeah.
So as long as she sticks around, he also has to. So there's also that.
There we go. Then I got my buddy Virgil hanging around.
Yeah.
So.
And Lynn, do you have any questions that are lingering and driving you mad?
Yeah. Was there any big things involving that circle, that like summoning circle?
Oh yeah.
So nothing that was going to come to fruition, I think, in and of itself, during the campaign, during those 2 days, basically. I know we were saying 3 days, but actually most of the action took place, I'm remembering, over like just 48 hours, which is insane. But the subway tunnel thing was meant to be, it's like someone found out, someone was tipped off somehow in Via Lupus and found out that this was happening. Basically, that the Vatican was using, this was funding the city project as a way to circumvent the pact, or to try to sneakily get into their territory, the territory across the river, and basically make it so that every supernatural what it was eventually going to do was once the ritual was in place, it was going to essentially remove most of the powers and abilities from anyone supernatural within it.
Oh boy! Ooh.
That was kind of the Vatican's overall plan to control the supernatural population in Rome.
Yeah, because I didn't like the second giant summoning circle of some sort. I'm like, as a player, like, oh no, well, what the hell is this?
Yeah. And of course, Vex's angle on it was, oh great, I get to be the only supernatural in the city, because of course, she'd have put that in there. So that was her way of trying to come out on top. Which I think she probably framed the whole thing after being found out, and this never came up in play, but she probably framed the whole thing as, well, someone's got to manage the Vatican. And so that was sort of a job she had taken upon herself, which, to be fair, she was doing.
She was doing
a little more aggressively than perhaps she should have.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Okay, I got one more question for Jim. What did Janice have to do with anything? Like, where did Janice fit in? Because there was the coins, and then it was mentioned a few times.
Yes.
But
Janice did not. Well, Janice, whatever. However, whatever side of the room you're standing, pronunciation isn't real in my mind. By the way, it's just a thing that we made up. But Janice, while not directly intervening, the thing about Janice, this was actually something that came up as I mentioned at one point during the campaign, and as so folks may realize this, before I finally cemented everything I wanted to do, I had a nice chat with Dee, Praxagora Thesmophoria, and we sort of came up with. I told her sort of what I wanted to do with the wizard, and she thought, well, yeah, maybe with Voltaire, and she was thinking, well, if he's a follower of Janus, Janus is a god of portals, basically, and would have that, and so that got me thinking about it, and so Janus so Voltaire was a follower of Janus. Okay. Janus did not have an agenda for the city per se. I think Janus, if anything, would have been just amused to see what was going to happen. But Voltaire was using the trappings of Janus to be. He was putting the coins by the statues. Mm-hmm. Some of the key statues, not every statue in the city, because that's you don't have time for that. But putting them at the key points to set it up, because again, Hecate hired him to set things up on the Earth side of things. So he was setting up the through the Janus coins as a representative of a sort of passage through a portal, basically. In this case, into possession of the statue. And I will say, actually, yeah, the statues, the seed of the statue ideas also came from Prax. That was basically she suggested the statues and the coins and being related to all that, and so I just used all of that because it was wonderful, and D is wonderful, but yeah, the idea here was just basically that the tools of Janus were being used for what was going on. So it was primarily just embodied in what Voltaire was doing.
Okay, cool.
If that makes sense.
Definitely. And this is the question that I like to end on whenever I do these. And that is, what surprised you? In the course of any story, there are things that take us by surprise. For my favorites, it's the character gets entirely away from me. I'm not in the pilot seat. They are. That's always my most pleasant surprise. But there's also like moments where it's just, I was not expecting that. So that is how I like to end things on, is the things that, jumped out at you. So, Lynn, is there a particular moment or thing that jumped out at you with this campaign?
Oh, I think the one thing that took me by surprise was the Medusa thing. Because I mean, like, it didn't really like, oh, okay, for the party. But I mean, on a character thing, I think it was just like the fact that like something that kind of like made me adjust the way I was playing Mallory like halfway through was like a weird like roll thing was like every time I like rolled what was it name to a face, I would roll good. Mm-hmm. Like I would roll really good despite like not having anything. I'm just like, okay, she's more connected, more better at being connected than I initially thought, and I'm just gonna play that up a little bit more. Like every time that happened, and it happened consistently, which was very strange.
Yeah, rolling like 9s to 12s.
Yeah,
on those rolls, and just like bang, you know this person.
Which was kind of like how like I played her in like the last couple episodes, just like being a little more savvy with like that aspect of it, despite being not necessarily caring about other things.
Sara, anything in particular that like surprised you?
So from plot perspective, I was not expecting Abaddon. Not gonna lie, that was sort of like in hindsight, I see all the hooks for it. But at the time I was like, oh crap, like did not see that coming at all. So that was really cool to have that kind of final boss, if you were, character that otherwise we wouldn't have had. And on a character level, I knew that I didn't want Kai to go with any of the cults or groups that were looking for them. I knew that, but sort of the way that they hit the, okay, I'm done with all this bullshit. Everybody is after me. I've had it, my own person. You are now turned into stone, and I'm sticking my friend on because he made me a deal, but I don't really like your tone, so he can go all revenant on your ass, and I don't care. Kind of in the last few episodes, just sort of like they'd been awake for, even though they'd slept, they'd like been awake for too long for this bullshit anymore. And I wasn't expecting, certainly, to turn somebody into a statue, but certainly and for sure to just have sort of like, I am the Oracle, I belong to no one kind of moment.
Mm-hmm.
It's very cool to see. Jim, what took you by surprise?
Oh, I mean, I was being surprised constantly, but then again, that's generally how I run games. Is I enjoy seeing the surprise and seeing what the players are doing. By and large, the funny thing is when you try to sort of pin down who is the villain of this piece, it's not that straightforward because it's kind of everybody. Which is kind of one of the tropes of urban fantasy, and end of noir before it, and so that's kind of what I tried to reflect. But so I have these NPCs that are there, they're present, and I have no idea. While I do have threats that are moving and they have agendas, I don't. I never really decide ahead of time exactly what they're going to do when, because the PCs determine that through their actions. So I was not expecting. I mean, a lot of the stuff that Kai ended up doing, I wasn't expecting Kai to be as just so vehemently resistant to these groups that would come up to them, and then just to start attaching themselves to others. I wasn't expecting the. I really wasn't expecting the false prophecy that basically I was like, okay, well, I guess that's going to kickstart this off.
Yeah.
Which was glorious. And
this is my fault.
And then just turning Ileana to stone. That was wonderful. I think on with respect to stuff on Mallory's side, I was not expecting I was not expecting Mallory to get along so well with everybody. It's just basically became very much the person that can, just find everybody, and also to basically to at the end talk Abaddon down by picking out. Lynn figured out the one perfect thing to say, because what I decided ahead of time was that Abaddon was at their core an unappreciated employee. And so I was like, and the moment Mallory said it, I was like, oh crap, that's right. They have much more in common than I realized. So it's like, okay, we're going with this. So that was perfect. I will say, I mean, I was delightedly surprised by everything that initially that Katie did with Serena, as to how she was in many ways the core of, I think, the seed of that reaction of Rome. It's like this, I don't have time for the supernatural bullshit to be happening. Not like scared or running from it. It's just like, this is getting in the way of my getting my agenda done. As a perfectly human person, for the most part.
I've got pictures to take and product to push.
Yes.
Get out of my way.
It's like a more like individual thing of like that thing when they find like ruins. It's not like, oh, these are wonderful. It's like, this is gonna, what the.
This is really gonna screw up my commute, isn't it?
Yeah,
that was so wonderful. And then also just seeing what Alyssa did with Manny. Just, I was not expecting the boyfriend thing to happen necessarily. We knew that this was someone that as a character connection, this was someone that Manny was seeing. Tom was someone Manny was seeing. I didn't expect Tom to become as integral to things as he became, because of how Manny ended up drawing him into things and telling him the truth, which was awesome.
Yeah, as a character, I felt so bad for like Manny. Manny's just trying to hold things down, and all of us are just like pulling in different, like just knocking stuff over, like just in our way. It's just like, okay.
So I was gloriously
and they're the
surprised by
Fae.
everyone.
They're supposed to be the Chaos Gremlin.
Yeah.
So no, that is a delight, and it's been an absolute delight talking with all of you. And thank you for this amazing story that you all have contributed and breathed life into these characters and this narrative. And thank you for letting me come here and just poke you with questions. I absolutely adore doing this, and I adore all of you. And thank you all watching live, whether VOD, YouTube, wherever you are. A story is nothing without its audience. You're as much a part of this as we are, and thank you so much for tuning in. And with that, I'm going to hand it back over to Jim.
Well, Pope, thank you so much for agreeing to do this once again. This was wonderful. I'm so glad we had the chance to sit down and jaw about this for a bit and just kind of unfurl all the things that were still furled, basically, for the most part. Being able to dig in, and it just really helps. Your series of Q&A has helped me to reiterate to myself how much I loved this campaign and the things I loved about it. So thank you so much. It's wonderful. So we're gonna go ahead and go around and do our outros. Feel free to tell folks where they can find you, plug anything you like, and any final thoughts you might want to share with anybody about anything. We're gonna go ahead and start with our guest host for today, Pope.
Hey everybody, Pope here, Pope World Bill on Twitter, Pope World Bill on Twitch. I lurk in all your streams. If you want to see more of my ridiculous face, I throw up things on Twitter, so you can follow me there, get all the details. As is with the Q&As, I like to plug other things. And next thing coming up that I think you all should tune in for is a show that I did another one of these Q&A things for. It's called After the Fire. It is starting its last season, season 6, Thursday. I believe it is 2 p.m. Eastern. If you want to get the precise time, check out Black Cats Gaming or follow Black Cats. And yeah, if you want something that feels genuinely authentic to A Song of Ice and Fire, I don't think there's something better out there right now, and that even includes the TV shows. So no, definitely tune in, give them some love, and till next time, take care.
Yay! Thank you so much. This was awesome. And now over to Lynn.
Hey, I'm Lynn, Flying Cirrus on Twitter, Twitch. Catch me there, any of those places. You have post my art on Twitter, and I have a lot of honestly right now it's a lot of Gundam and a lot of Final Fantasy 14 screenshots. But there is going to be more stuff happening, and yeah, you'll be able to catch me next on Warren DM's Scion, Birth of the New Gods, where it's so fun. It's playing just godlings who like are trying to figure out what they're doing, trying to figure out best we can. Maybe do a little bit of light, like, cons along the way, using our godlike powers in totally responsible ways. Of course, those are on Saturdays on 1DM. And, yeah. And just keep an eye out. I've got some one-shots, some things happening. So, yeah, keep an eye on that. And thank you very much, Poe, for doing this, and Jim for running it, and for such a delight playing with you.
Hey, awesome. Me too so much. And finally, over to Sara.
Hi, I am Sara. You can find me on the internet at Sara of Swords. You can next find me tomorrow, 8 p.m. over on channel Ava Sarate. We are doing the second of 2 patient panels for Play Cancer Away. I'm hosting that, moderating, kind of playing Pope's role for fellow cancer friends there. And check out Play Cancer Away on Twitter for our full schedule of games kicking off. We've rescheduled the Flying Circus game to later in the month. which Lynn is on.
Yes.
And our games will kick off, I think, on Wednesday then with Witches and Spellcraft. And you can find me back here on Jim's channel later in the month, early in November, for Sunken, a Trophy Dark game of nautical horror, where I will be running for 3 stories for a group of people. And if you're terrified of the ocean, it's very big and we are not, come check that out.
It's so big. So much ocean. Much water, very scary.
Much water, very deep.
Much water, very deep. No, I'm really excited for this because, once again, I'm a fan of the Rime of the Ancient Mariner. So seeing this is going to be really cool. I probably the fact that this is being run means that I will not shut up about the Rime of the Ancient Mariner. Probably.
That's quite all right.
Awesome. All right, and who the hell am I? I don't know. I'm Jim Ryan. You can find me at OtherDoc on both Twitch and Twitter. My website is jimyesthatjim.com, where you can find my Geek Observation podcast and links to my various other podcasts, audio dramas, writings, and such. I have links down below to my website, Twitter, YouTube channel, and various other things. I am also, once more, I'm going to put, going to put Katie and Alyssa's information also in the chat because they were integral to this campaign and they were very much missed. That's the wrong Alyssa. I just typed in there. Wait, it's the... Let me put the right one. This was what happens when you have two people with the same name on your channel sometimes, folks. But there we go. There we go. It's the second link, that second one. It was just... I wish they could have stayed with us, but totally, real life happens. But that said, what is happening here? So, back on this channel on Friday, I am going to be running a one-shot of Inspectors. That is it is going to be also a charity stream that as part of this campaign that Anino is currently got going on for RACES. That's RAICES, the Refugee and Immigrant Center for Education and Legal Services. I'm putting a link to that campaign there in the chat. Also, please check that out and give if you can. We're going to be doing a one-shot of an Inspector's set in Las Vegas. So I have tentatively titled it Sin City Shamble. And I am very much looking forward to seeing what degree of chaos the players cause. So that will be this Friday. Also, of course, on Saturday nights here on this channel, I run Invisible Sun, The Edge of Paradox. And right now they're finding out a lot of things and learning that there apparently are consequences for things that they do, which is a strange and foreign feeling to some of them. So it's an interesting time. We're actually suddenly delving very deep into character backstory, which I was not expecting, but it is glorious. So that is coming up. And of course, again, Sunken will be happening. Probably the first streamed stuff I'm thinking will be early November. So it'll be right on end of October, beginning of November is when we shall be having that, and I cannot wait. But in the meantime, when we hit the end card, I am going to send a raid over to somebody. Let's see who's doing stuff. Let's see, Ray right now is doing stuff over at With a Brick. So might just go over and say hi to them because I think they're playing Red Dead Redemption. We're going to go over there and say hi. Feel free to hang on if you're so inclined and say hi to them with us. That again will be when we hit the end card. In the meantime, folks, thank you all very much for watching. Take care, and we will see you all of a sudden. Farewell.